The repair bay of the alien space station was filled with the sound of sparks and clanging metal. Daniel wiped the sweat from his forehead, even though the station's air was always cold. He had been fixing broken panels all day, crawling through narrow shafts and reconnecting loose wires. To him, this was just another job. He was used to being the human mechanic on stations where no one really noticed him. But today, someone caught his eye. She was standing at the far end of the bay, bent over a pile of metal scraps, sorting them with quick, sharp movements. She was small compared to most aliens on the station, and she always wore a dark hoodie that hid most of her face. Daniel had seen her before, but never really paid attention. Just another worker, he thought. Yet something about the way she moved felt off. She didn't slouch like the others. She didn't complain. Her posture was straight, almost too straight, like a soldier trying to look weak and failing. Daniel tightened a bolt on the panel he was fixing and kept stealing glances. The hoodie cast a shadow over her features, but sometimes he caught a glimpse of glowing patterns on her skin, quickly hidden whenever she noticed his stare. He brushed it off, thinking maybe it was just a trick of the light. Still, curiosity tugged at him. Hours later, when most workers left for food, she stayed behind. Daniel noticed her lifting a piece of equipment that normally took 2 workers to move. She carried it as if it weighed nothing. His wrench nearly slipped from his hand. No one else seemed to see it. She dropped the part in place, brushed her hands together, and walked away as if nothing had happened. Strange, Daniel muttered under his breath. That night, the station's alarm suddenly blared. A short circuit somewhere had triggered a fire in one of the cargo corridors. Daniel rushed out of his bunk and grabbed his toolkit. He knew if no one fixed it fast, the oxygen systems might shut down. Smoke filled the passage as he pushed forward, coughing into his sleeve. Through the haze, he saw her. The alien worker was already there, kneeling near a broken junction box. Sparks danced across her hands as she tried to connect the wires without tools. Her hoodie was still up, the shadow of her face barely visible. Daniel slowed, wondering why she was the only one here. "I can help!" he shouted over the crackle of fire. She didn't even look at him. Instead, she turned her back and kept working, her hands moving fast. Sparks burned her sleeves, but she didn't flinch. Daniel dropped to his knees beside her, yanking open his kit. "You'll get yourself killed," he said, reaching for the wires. Her head tilted slightly, as if she was annoyed by his presence, but still she let him work. Together, they managed to shut the junction and cut the fire from spreading. The alarm faded, leaving only the sound of cooling metal. Breathing hard, Daniel leaned against the wall. "You're good with your hands," he said, trying to catch her eyes. She stood without answering. For a moment, Daniel thought she might finally say something, but instead she walked away into the smoke, her hoodie hiding her face again. The next day, Daniel saw her again in the bay. She was back to sorting scrap like nothing had happened. He couldn't shake the memory of her strength, the way she ignored him, the way she moved like she had trained for something far greater than hauling metal. He decided to test her. Walking over, he picked up a heavy pipe and pretended to struggle. "Hey, can you give me a hand?" he asked. She glanced at him briefly. Then, with no effort, she lifted the pipe out of his hands and set it down exactly where it belonged. Her movements were precise, almost elegant. Daniel's mouth opened to say something, but she had already turned back to her work. That night, rumors spread among the crew. Some whispered about a royal fugitive hiding in the station, a runaway from one of the higher alien castes. Daniel listened quietly, his eyes drifting toward the worker in the corner. She sat alone, her hood pulled low, as if trying to disappear. Lying in his bunk later, Daniel couldn't stop thinking. Why was she hiding? Why was she working like a common laborer when her strength and skill clearly set her apart? And why did she look so familiar, like he had seen her kind somewhere important before? The next day brought another surprise. Daniel was repairing a control panel when he noticed her slipping into a restricted corridor. Normally, only supervisors had access there. Curious, he followed quietly, keeping his distance. He saw her pull out a small communicator. Sleek, expensive, nothing a worker could ever own. She spoke softly into it, in a language Daniel didn't recognize. When she turned, he barely ducked behind a wall before she saw him. His heart raced. This wasn't just a simple worker. She was someone else, someone hiding a dangerous truth. From that moment, Daniel's curiosity turned into suspicion, and suspicion into determination. He had to know who she really was. Why was she here pretending? Why did she avoid everyone's eyes? And most of all, what would happen if one day she pulled back that hood? Daniel woke up early the next morning, his mind still restless from what he had seen the night before. The image of the alien worker carrying heavy equipment with ease, and then using a communicator she should not have owned, stayed in his head like a puzzle he could not solve. He had fixed machines all his life, but this was different. This was about a person who did not fit into the picture she showed to others. In the repair bay, Daniel tried to act normal, but his eyes kept searching for her. She was there again, wearing the same old hoodie, her head bent low as she worked. To anyone else, she looked ordinary, tired, just another worker in the long line of alien laborers on the station. But Daniel now saw things others did not notice. The way she walked was too steady, too graceful for someone used to lifting scrap all day. The way her fingers moved when she handled tools was careful, precise, like someone trained in fine work, not just dirty labor. He pretended to focus on a control panel, but he was watching her. She picked up a metal container almost her size and slid it onto a shelf as if it weighed nothing. Daniel stared in disbelief. A normal worker needed 2 people and a lift machine for that. She looked around quickly after doing it, as if making sure nobody saw. But Daniel had seen. He almost wanted to confront her, to ask who she really was, but something inside warned him to wait. Later that day, during a break, Daniel sat with some of the other workers. The air was filled with the usual talk about food shortages, low pay, and rumors. Then one worker lowered his voice and leaned in. "They say someone important is hiding on this station," he whispered. "A royal bloodline. A runaway." Daniel's ears perked up. "A royal? Why would someone like that hide here?" The worker shrugged. "Politics, power struggles, who knows? But they say bounty hunters are looking. Dangerous times." Daniel tried to act uninterested, but his mind raced. Could it be her? Could the strange worker in the hoodie actually be this runaway everyone whispered about? He glanced across the bay where she sat alone, quietly eating, never speaking to anyone. It fit too well. The more he thought about it, the more questions filled his head. Why would a royal lower herself to work as a laborer? Why wear a hoodie to hide her face? Why use strength and skill only when she thought no one was looking? That evening, Daniel decided to test her again. He was repairing a damaged lift when he called out, "Hey, could you hold this up for me?" She looked at him for a moment, as if deciding whether to respond. Then she walked over silently and grabbed the heavy side of the machine. With one hand, she held it steady while Daniel tightened the bolts. His hands shook, not from the weight, but from the realization that her strength was far beyond what he could explain. "Thanks," he said, hoping she might say something back. But she just gave a short nod and walked away, pulling her hood lower over her face. That night, Daniel could not sleep. He kept replaying everything in his head. Her silence, her strength, her careful way of avoiding everyone's eyes. He lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the station, until he finally decided he would follow her. The next day gave him the chance. After work hours, he saw her slip away down a side corridor. Quietly, Daniel followed, keeping to the shadows. The deeper she went, the emptier the halls became. He saw her stop near a sealed maintenance door. She looked around carefully before pulling a small device from her pocket. The door unlocked with a soft click, though that door was supposed to open only with supervisor clearance. She stepped inside. Daniel crept closer and peeked through the gap before the door closed. She was speaking into the communicator again, her voice soft and urgent in a language he could not understand. But he noticed the way she stood. Her back straight, her chin lifted slightly, her tone commanding. That was not the voice of a worker. That was the voice of someone used to authority. The door hissed shut, leaving Daniel outside with his heart pounding. He pressed his back to the wall, struggling to breathe quietly. He had seen enough. She was no ordinary worker. The rumors were true. She must be someone important, someone dangerous to be around. As he returned to his quarters, he tried to calm his racing thoughts. If she was a runaway royal, then bounty hunters would surely come for her. And if they discovered he knew, they might come for him too. He should stay away, he told himself. It was safer to ignore her, to keep his head down. But he knew he couldn't. Curiosity had taken root in him. Every glance at her was like a spark he could not put out. He wanted to know the truth, no matter how dangerous it was. He wanted to see the face hidden beneath that hood. And deep down, a strange feeling stirred in him. Something that told him her secret was not just hers anymore. It was now pulling him into a story far bigger than fixing broken panels on an alien station. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. And she was at the center of it. The day of the emergency drill came without warning. Loud sirens echoed through the station, making every worker freeze for a moment before rushing into action. Daniel grabbed his toolkit, like always, and moved toward the main corridor where lights flashed red. Drills were common, but this one felt different. The smoke smelled too real, the ground shook slightly, and people shouted in panic instead of following orders calmly. Something had gone wrong. Daniel ran past a group of aliens carrying fire extinguishers. Sparks fell from the ceiling as if the station itself was breaking apart. He turned a corner and stopped when he saw her, the worker in the hoodie. She was stuck halfway inside a narrow passage, her sleeve caught between twisted metal beams. Smoke curled around her, and the emergency sprinklers hissed uselessly above. Without thinking, Daniel sprinted forward. "Hold still," he shouted. She struggled, pulling hard, but the beam held her in place. For the first time, her hood slipped back a little, and Daniel caught a glimpse of glowing skin beneath. His breath caught, but he forced himself to focus. He jammed a wrench into the beam, using all his strength to pry it open. Metal groaned, and finally the worker pulled free. She fell against him, her hood dropping completely this time. Daniel froze. His eyes widened as he saw her face clearly for the first time. Her skin was marked with faint, glowing tattoos that shimmered in the smoke-filled light. They were not ordinary markings. He had seen them in old books, in files that spoke of alien royal families. They were sacred symbols, burned into the skin of those born into power. "You're," Daniel whispered, but the words stuck in his throat. The alien girl looked straight at him, her eyes bright and sharp, nothing like the dull stares of ordinary workers. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. Then she yanked the hood back over her head. "Forget what you saw," she said in a low, firm voice. It was the first time Daniel had ever heard her speak. Her voice was strong, commanding, not shy or weak like he had imagined. Before Daniel could respond, shouts echoed down the corridor. He turned and saw figures in dark armor pushing through the smoke. They were not station guards. They carried weapons, and their eyes scanned the chaos with deadly focus. Bounty hunters. The girl's hand shot to his arm. "Run," she ordered. Daniel blinked. "Run? Who are they? Why are they after you?" "No time," she said, pulling him with surprising force. He stumbled but followed as she dragged him through the side corridor. The pounding of boots grew louder behind them, and blasts from the hunters' weapons scorched the walls. Daniel ducked instinctively as one shot barely missed his head. They burst into a maintenance bay, where machines and scrap metal created a maze of shadows. She finally let go of his arm and spun toward him, her hood slipping again. "You shouldn't have seen this," she said, her eyes glowing faintly under the emergency lights. "You're not just a worker," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "You're a princess, aren't you?" Her lips pressed into a hard line. She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes told him everything. Daniel's head spun. The rumors were true. A runaway royal, hiding among common workers. And he had been the fool who thought she was just shy and silent. Now, because he had seen her face, he was caught in her storm. The hunters' voices came closer. The girl pulled a small blade from her sleeve, its edge glowing faint blue. She moved like a trained fighter, her posture shifting into something sharp and dangerous. Daniel stared, unable to believe this was the same quiet figure who once sorted scrap metal in silence. "Stay behind me," she said firmly. Daniel almost laughed at the absurdity. "Behind you? They've got blasters. We'll both be dead." She glanced back at him with eyes that held no fear. "Not if you listen." The hunters stepped into the bay, weapons raised. One shouted something in an alien tongue, pointing straight at the girl. She answered in the same language, her tone filled with authority. Even Daniel could tell her words carried weight like commands, but the hunters didn't lower their weapons. She suddenly grabbed Daniel's hand and pulled him behind a pile of scrap. "We'll break through the east corridor," she whispered. "You're insane," Daniel muttered, but his body moved with hers. Adrenaline burned in his chest. He could hear the hunters' boots pounding closer, smell the sharp scent of their weapons heating. Then she moved. In one swift motion, she leapt out, blade flashing. Sparks flew as she struck the weapon of the nearest hunter, sending it clattering away. Daniel gawked. Her movements were too fast, too sharp for anyone pretending to be a worker. "Go!" she shouted. Daniel stumbled into motion, grabbing a metal rod from the floor and swinging it wildly at another hunter. He wasn't graceful, but the surprise gave him a moment to shove the man back. Together, he and the girl dashed through the opening she had created, the bay filling with shouts and blasts behind them. When they finally reached a sealed hatch, Daniel leaned against it, gasping for air. "You're not just a princess, are you? You fight like a soldier." She pressed her palm to a panel, and the hatch slid open. "I am both," she said. Daniel's world tilted again, a royal, a warrior, a fugitive. And somehow, he was standing beside her, caught in the middle of something far bigger than he ever imagined. As the hatch closed behind them, Daniel's hands trembled. He knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same after seeing the truth hidden beneath that hood. The corridor beyond the hatch was darker and quieter, but Daniel's heart was still pounding from the chase. He stumbled after the alien girl, struggling to keep up with her fast steps. She moved with purpose, like she knew every passage of the station better than anyone else. Daniel wanted to stop and demand answers, but the sound of distant boots echoing behind them reminded him they were still being hunted. Finally, when they reached an empty storage room, she slammed the door shut and pressed her back against it. Her hood fell again, revealing the glowing tattoos on her skin. Daniel stared at her, his chest heaving, unable to stop himself from asking the question burning in his mind. "Who are you really?" he whispered. For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes searched his face as if deciding whether to trust him. Then, with a tired sigh, she spoke. "My name is Serenia." The name struck Daniel like a lightning bolt. He had heard it before in passing, whispers of a royal daughter who had disappeared months ago. The higher castes had kept it quiet, but rumors traveled fast in dark corners. Serenia, the princess who dared to speak against her own bloodline, the one who refused to follow the old rules. You're a princess?" Daniel asked, almost choking on the word. Her jaw tightened. "Not anymore. I abandoned that life. I refused to marry the warlord my family promised me to. They wanted me to be a trophy. I chose freedom. For that, they called me a traitor." Daniel felt his mouth go dry. It explained everything, the hoodie, the hiding, the silence. But it also meant something else. If bounty hunters were after her, they weren't just random mercenaries. They were paid to bring her back dead or alive. "And me?" Daniel asked, his voice lower. "Now that I know, what happens to me?" Serenia's gaze hardened. "You should walk away. Pretend you never saw me." Daniel let out a nervous laugh. "A little late for that, don't you think? Those hunters just tried to fry me too." Her silence was the only answer he needed. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was tangled in her fight, whether he liked it or not. A sudden explosion shook the walls. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Serenia's head snapped toward the noise. "They're breaching from the north side," she said quickly. Daniel frowned. "How do you know that?" "Because they're not here only for me," she said. "They'll tear the station apart if they have to. They'll kill anyone who stands in their way." Daniel's chest tightened. Ordinary workers had no idea what was happening. They thought this was just another drill. But if hunters stormed the place, hundreds could die. "We can't let that happen," he said without thinking. Serenia turned to him, her eyes narrowing. "You would risk your life for strangers?" "I'm a human," Daniel said. "That's what we do. Fix things, help people, even when it's stupid." Something flickered in her eyes, something almost soft. But the moment passed quickly. She pulled a small device from her belt and tossed it to him. "Then help me. That will trigger the blast doors. Use it to slow them down." Daniel fumbled with it, staring at the strange alien tech. "You trust me with this?" "You're still here," she said. "That's enough." The sound of boots grew louder again. Serenia pulled her blade, the glow from its edge casting light across her face. She looked every bit like a warrior princess, dangerous and proud. nothing like the silent worker he had once thought she was. Daniel swallowed hard and followed her out of the storage room. They sprinted through the corridors, Daniel planting the device at junctions like she ordered. Each time, a blast door slammed down behind them, cutting off the hunter's path. Shouts echoed on the other side, fists pounding metal, but it gave them precious seconds to move forward. As they ran, Daniel's mind buzzed with questions. Why had she trusted him so suddenly? Was it desperation? Or did she see something in him that even he didn't see? They finally reached the outer maintenance sector, a wide space filled with fuel lines and cargo crates. Serenia stopped, scanning the area. Her shoulders stiffened. They're already here. Daniel followed her gaze. Shadows moved among the crates, hunters at least a dozen, spreading out, weapons raised. The two of them were cornered. Great, Daniel muttered. Any bright ideas, Your Highness? Serenia shot him a sharp look. Don't call me that. Not anymore. The hunters spotted them and opened fire. Daniel dove behind a crate, heart hammering. Serenia moved differently, fast, precise, cutting through the shadows with her glowing blade. Sparks flew as she deflected a shot, then spun low, and striking one hunter down. Her movements were so fluid, it was hard to believe she had once been hiding in plain sight. Daniel gritted his teeth. He couldn't just cower. Grabbing a loose metal pipe, he charged at the nearest hunter from behind a crate, swinging with all his strength. The weapon clanged against armor, making the alien stumble. Daniel hit again and again until the hunter fell. Breathing hard, he looked around. Serenia was fighting three at once, her blade a blur. Daniel picked up the hunter's dropped blaster and fired clumsily, forcing another enemy to dive for cover. It was chaos. Blasts lit up the dark sector, crates shattered, and alarms wailed. Daniel fought clumsily but stubbornly, while Serenia fought like a storm. Together, they pushed through the hunters, their survival hanging by seconds. Finally, as the last hunter fell, the two of them collapsed behind a cargo stack. Smoke stung Daniel's throat, his hands shaking around the blaster. Serenia wiped blood from her cheek, her glowing tattoos bright under the emergency lights. Why didn't you leave me behind? Daniel asked between breaths. I'm just a mechanic. Her gaze locked onto his, steady and fierce. Because you didn't leave me. For a long moment, the noise of the station faded, and it was just the two of them, caught between fear and something deeper neither wanted to name. But the silence didn't last. More distant boots echoed in the corridors. The hunt wasn't over. Serenia stood, offering her hand to Daniel. If you stay with me, you'll never be safe again. Daniel took her hand, pulling himself up. Wasn't safe the moment you pulled off that hood. Together, they ran again, deeper into the station, knowing the real danger was only beginning. The station was still shaking from the last fight when Daniel and Serenia slipped into a hidden service tunnel. The walls were narrow, pipes dripping with condensation, and the sound of distant alarms echoed above them. Daniel's hands trembled as he gripped the stolen blaster, his mind racing. He was just a mechanic who fixed panels and engines, but now he was running with a fugitive princess who fought like a warrior. He could hardly understand how his life had changed in a single day. Serenia walked ahead, her hood down now, the glowing tattoos on her skin lighting the path faintly. She no longer bothered to hide her face. Her expression was calm, but her eyes stayed sharp, always listening for danger. Daniel could not help staring at her. Every movement of hers was controlled, deliberate, almost royal, yet fierce like someone used to war. Finally, when the tunnel widened, she stopped and turned to him. You shouldn't have followed me, she said. Daniel let out a short laugh, though it was shaky. I didn't exactly have a choice, did I? Those hunters nearly burned me alive. Besides, I'm not the type to walk away after seeing someone in trouble. Her lips curved in the faintest smile, but it vanished quickly. Helping me means becoming my enemy in the eyes of my people. They will not forgive you. They will not forgive us. Daniel leaned against the wall, catching his breath. Then I guess I'm already in too deep. He raised the blaster clumsily. I'm not much of a fighter, but I'm not useless either. Tell me what to do. For the first time, she studied him as if truly seeing him. Humans are strange, she said softly. You risk yourselves for others without reward. That's why She stopped herself before finishing, shaking her head. Never mind. We don't have time for talk. We have to move. As they walked deeper, Daniel asked, Why are they after you? Really? Not just because you ran away from your family. What's the truth? Serenya's shoulders tensed. For a while, she said nothing. Only the sound of dripping water filled the tunnel. At last, she spoke. I was born into the highest caste. My bloodline controls armies, fleets, entire systems, but I saw how they treated the lower castes, like slaves, like tools. I spoke against it. I said all people should be equal. For that, my father called me a traitor. They wanted to marry me off to a warlord to silence me. I refused. So I ran. Daniel's chest tightened. He had worked among aliens long enough to know the divide between castes was cruel. Her words explained everything. The hiding, the bounty hunters, the desperate need to survive. You're not just running from your family, Daniel realized. You're fighting for something bigger. Her gaze flicked to him. I was. But now it's only survival. They will kill me before they let me become a symbol for rebellion. Before Daniel could answer, a low rumble shook the tunnel. Serenya stiffened, her hand on her blade. They've found another way in. They rushed forward, emerging into a large chamber filled with old machinery. The glow of alien torches flickered in the distance. Hunters were closing in. Serenya crouched low, studying the maze of pipes and catwalks. Then she looked at Daniel. You know machines. Can you make a trap? Daniel blinked, then glanced around. Rusted pipes, loose wiring, broken valves. It was dangerous, but it was something he understood. Give me a minute, he said, already pulling out tools from his kit. While Serenya guarded the entry, Daniel worked furiously. He ripped open a pressure valve, rerouted a cable, and created a crude but powerful diversion system. His hands moved faster than his thoughts, instinct guiding him. When Serenya shouted that the hunters were near, he yanked the final lever and pulled her behind cover. The hunters stormed in, just as steam and sparks exploded from the pipes. A roar of gas filled the room, blinding them. Daniel threw a broken fuse into the mess, and fire erupted, forcing the hunters to scatter. The two of them used the chaos to slip through another exit. Breathless, Serenya glanced at him with surprise. You're more useful than you look. Daniel smirked despite his fear. Told you, I fix things, even problems like bounty hunters. They continued running until they reached a maintenance dock overlooking the void of space. Stars glittered outside the reinforced glass, but inside the dock was quiet for now. Serenya leaned against the wall, exhaustion finally showing on her face. Daniel sank to the floor beside her. So what now? We can't run forever. Her eyes softened as she looked at him. I don't know. I thought I could hide here, live as a worker, disappear. But now you've seen what I am, and the hunters will not stop. Daniel rubbed his face, trying to steady his breathing. Then maybe you shouldn't hide anymore. Maybe you should fight back. She gave a small, bitter laugh. Fight back? Against fleets and armies? I am only one. You're not alone, Daniel said firmly. Not anymore. For a moment, their eyes locked, and something unspoken passed between them. Trust. A fragile bond formed in the middle of danger. But the moment was broken when the sound of metal boots echoed again. Reinforcements were coming. Serenya straightened, her expression hardening. Then we fight together. Daniel stood, gripping the blaster tighter. Fear still twisted his stomach, but he pushed it down. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. Not tonight. As the hunters entered the dock, Serenya's blade ignited once more, glowing in the dim light. Daniel raised his weapon at her side. They exchanged a quick nod, no words needed. And then they charged. Not as a runaway princess and a human mechanic, but as allies, standing side by side against the storm closing in on them. The fight in the maintenance dock was brutal, but Daniel and Serenya somehow survived it. The hunters pulled back, leaving scorch marks across the walls and shattered crates everywhere. Daniel's hands were still shaking from firing the blaster, but Serenya stood tall, her glowing tattoos bright against the shadows. She looked untouchable, but Daniel could see the small tremor in her arm, the sweat on her forehead. She was tired, even if she refused to show it. They didn't have long to rest. More alarms sounded through the station, followed by the heavy thud of boots in the distance. Serenya's sharp ears picked up the direction before Daniel did. She motioned for him to follow. They slipped into another service corridor, quieter than the rest, but Daniel felt something wrong. The silence was too heavy, too staged. As they crept forward, they heard voices ahead. Serenya froze, her blade half drawn. Daniel leaned closer, listening. What he heard made his stomach twist. It was one of the workers, A man Daniel recognized, someone he had shared meals with in the mess hall. His voice was nervous, but he was speaking to the hunters. Yes, she's here. The girl with the hood. I saw her with the human. They went this way. If I tell you where, you'll keep me safe, right? Daniel's jaw clenched. Betrayal. The workers must have realized what Serenia was, and fear made them sell her out. He glanced at Serenia, expecting anger, but her face was unreadable. Only her eyes showed the faintest glimmer of pain, like she had already expected it. They would rather save themselves than stand with me, she whispered. This is the cost of rebellion. Daniel wanted to argue, but before he could, the sound of boots moved closer. The hunters were coming straight toward them. Serenia grabbed his arm, pulling him back into the shadows. We fight here, she said quietly. Daniel's heart pounded. There are too many. Then we cut them down, she interrupted sharply. If we run again, they will only tighten the net. Here, we make our stand. The hunters rounded the corner. Their leader barked an order, and they raised their weapons. Daniel ducked behind a pipe as blaster fire lit up the corridor. Sparks showered down, filling the air with the stench of burning metal. Serenia leapt forward, her blade slicing through the smoke. She moved with deadly grace, striking down 2 hunters in quick succession. Daniel fired blindly, forcing the others to scatter. His aim wasn't perfect, but desperation made him bold. He ducked another blast, rolled to the side, and smashed a loose pipe into the nearest attacker's helmet. The hunter collapsed, sparks flying from damaged armor. But they were too many. For every one they struck down, 2 more pressed forward. Daniel's arms ached, his lungs burned, and still they came. Serenia fought like fire, but even she was being pushed back. A shot grazed her shoulder, making her stumble. Daniel's stomach dropped when he saw blood glowing faintly where the blast had hit her. Serenia! He shouted, rushing to cover her. He fired wildly, driving the hunters back for a moment. She gritted her teeth, steadying herself, refusing to fall. They regrouped behind a bulkhead door, panting. Daniel pressed his hand over her wound, but she shoved him away. It's nothing, she said harshly, though her voice trembled slightly. Focus. They're regrouping. The sound of metal scraping echoed down the corridor. The hunters were preparing to breach the door. Daniel's eyes darted around, desperate for something. Anything. Then he spotted a broken control panel on the wall. Wires sparked from it, loose but alive. He looked at Serenia. If I overload this, it'll blow. Might take them with it. Serenia nodded, no hesitation in her eyes. Do it. I'll hold them until you're ready. Before Daniel could stop her, she pushed away from the wall, blade in hand, and faced the advancing hunters. She moved slower now, her wound weighing on her, but her strikes were still sharp, still terrifying. She blocked a blast with the flat of her blade, spun low, and cut the weapon in half. Daniel tore into the panel, his fingers moving fast, sparks biting at his skin. The hum of energy built higher, hotter, until sweat poured down his face. He shouted, Serenia, now! She dove back as he ripped the last wire free. The panel exploded in a roar of light and fire, the shockwave shaking the corridor. Hunters were thrown back, their armor cracking under the force. Smoke filled the air, and for a few seconds, silence followed. Daniel coughed, crawling toward Serenia. She was slumped against the wall, her blade dim, her chest rising and falling fast. He grabbed her shoulders, fear twisting his chest. Stay with me. Come on, you're tougher than this. Her eyes opened slowly, focusing on him. Despite the pain, a faint smile touched her lips. You fight like a human, reckless, stubborn. Yeah, well, it works, Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. Before either of them could speak again, a sharp sound echoed. More hunters, reinforcements. The explosion hadn't finished them all. Daniel's stomach dropped, but Serenia forced herself to stand, swaying slightly. She raised her blade again, even as her body shook. I will not fall to them, she said firmly. Daniel stood beside her, lifting the blaster with trembling hands. He was terrified, but he refused to leave her. Then neither will I. The corridor filled with footsteps, the glow of weapons drawing closer. The two of them stood together, side by side, ready to fight again. Daniel knew he might die here, but something inside him refused to back down. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about standing with her, no matter the cost. As the hunters surged forward once more, Serenia let out a cry, her blade shining bright, and Daniel fired until his weapon burned hot in his hands. Betrayal had brought the hunters close, but defiance kept them standing. And in that chaos, their bond grew stronger, forged in fire and blood, unbreakable no matter what came next. The corridor battle dragged on until Daniel thought his arms would fall off. The blaster grew hot in his hands, every shot rattling his bones. Serenia was still fighting, her glowing blade cutting arcs of light through the smoke, but her movements were slowing. She had taken too many hits, and the blood seeping through her sleeve told Daniel she could not last forever. Still, she refused to fall, each strike carrying the weight of her pride. At last, the hunters hesitated. Their leader, a tall alien in black armor, stepped forward, his voice echoing through the hall. "Serenia of the royal line," he announced coldly. "Your time hiding is over. Come with us, and perhaps we will spare the human." Daniel's blood froze. The hunter's helmet turned toward him, and he realized what they meant. He was now leverage, a loose end. If Serenia surrendered, they might let him live. If she fought, he would die with her. Serenia lifted her chin, her glowing tattoos fierce in the dim corridor. "You touch him," she said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion, "and you will answer to me." The leader tilted his head, almost amused. "You think you can protect him? You are one against many." Daniel's heart pounded. He stepped closer to her, his voice shaking but loud enough to carry. "Don't do this for me. Don't give up. If they want me, they'll have to take me too." The leader barked a laugh. "Then you choose death." He raised his weapon. Before he could fire, Serenia moved. With a burst of speed Daniel didn't think she had left, she lunged forward, blade flashing. Sparks exploded as she struck the leader's weapon, forcing it aside. The hunters shouted and rushed forward, but Daniel was already firing, his shots wild but enough to create chaos. The corridor turned into a storm of fire and steel once more. Daniel fought until his arms shook, swinging the blaster like a club when its charge finally died. Serenia battled beside him, her every strike desperate but filled with fury. She fought not as a princess hiding her face, but as a leader refusing to bow. Then, suddenly, silence. The last hunter fell. Their bodies sprawled across the corridor floor. Smoke hung heavy in the air. Daniel dropped the useless blaster, his chest heaving. Serenia leaned against the wall, her blade flickering weakly before finally dimming. They had survived, but for how long? Daniel knelt beside her, grabbing her arm gently. "We can't stay here. More will come." She shook her head, her eyes closing briefly before forcing them open again. "No, they will not stop. My family sent them. They will send more, again and again. As long as I hide, they will hunt. And now?" Her gaze softened on him. "You are caught in it too." Daniel swallowed hard. He wanted to say he would walk away, that he would go back to fixing machines and forget all of this. But he knew it wasn't true. He couldn't unsee who she was. He couldn't ignore what he felt standing beside her in battle. "I'm already in it," he said quietly. "So, what now?" Serenia's eyes burned with something fierce. "Now I stop running." She stood slowly, wincing at the pain but holding her head high. Her hood hung loose around her shoulders, her tattoos glowing bright. She no longer tried to hide them. She looked like what she truly was, a princess who had chosen her own path. Daniel stared at her, awe mixing with fear. "If you stop running, that means war." "War has already begun," she replied. "The lower castes whisper of rebellion, but they have no face, no voice. If they see me stand, they will rise. And if I fall, then at least I fall as myself, not as a shadow." Her words lit something in Daniel's chest. He had spent his life fixing broken machines, patching up parts no one else cared about. But maybe now he had found something bigger to fix, a broken system, a broken empire. And he wasn't going to let her face it alone. Footsteps echoed again in the distance. The hunters were regrouping. Daniel's instincts screamed at him to run, but Serenia didn't move. Instead, she stepped into the center of the corridor, standing tall, her blade humming back to life. When the hunters appeared, she didn't hide. She raised her chin and declared loudly, her voice carrying through the metal halls, "I am Serenia, heir of the royal bloodline. I will no longer bow to tyranny, and this human is under my protection. Touch him, and you face me." The hunters hesitated, their weapons raised, but their steps faltering. None of them had expected her to declare herself openly. Whispers spread among the workers who had gathered in the shadows, watching. The truth was out now. The princess who vanished had returned, not as a captive, but as a leader. Daniel felt the weight of the moment sink into him. By standing beside her, he had tied his fate to hers. There was no going back. The hunters slowly pulled back, uncertain. They had not been sent to fight an open rebellion, only to capture a runaway. Serenya's bold declaration had changed the rules. As silence fell again, Serenya turned to Daniel. For the first time since he met her eyes softened fully, no mask, no shadow. "You are free to walk away," she said gently. "You owe me nothing." Daniel shook his head, a small, tired smile on his face. "You're wrong. I owe you everything. You made me more than just a mechanic, and I'm not walking away." For a long moment, they stood in silence, side by side, surrounded by the smoke of battle and the whispers of frightened workers who now looked at Serenya with new eyes. Not as a fugitive, not as a traitor, but as hope. Daniel realized then that his life had changed forever. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was part of something larger, something that might tear the galaxy apart or save it. And as Serenya lifted her blade once more, Daniel stood beside her, ready for whatever came next.